My name is Lexi Jong, and here I like to talk about luxury makeup. Today, we're going to be talking about the Dior Nightbird palette. So this is part of the Birds of a Feather collection. I have 3 looks to show you. I do have swatches and comparison swatches in my original video with the first impressions, so I'll leave that link down below for any of you who are interested in that. We're going to go ahead and start off by swatching this. Now, this palette is made in Italy. Most of the Dior palettes that we get here in the US are made in France. So that is a difference here. And then it's because it has this beautiful imprinting, which you can see I've kind of worked my way through part of that. But the beautiful feather imprinting, that is going to basically give an extra price increase. So this is actually only a 4-gram palette, which is the same size as the Dior blushes, which are made in France. So the blushes and the eyeshadow palettes technically have the same amount of product. Again, you get more color from here. You get the beautiful imprinting. This palette, the Nightbird 459 palette, I think is, I think it's the better palette of the ones in this collection, in my opinion. I actually really do like this palette. My one complaint about this palette is that every single shade is shimmery. And I don't mind that. I don't mind adding in something else, but I also would have preferred to have one like matte shade in here, or even just like a satin or something. Well, yeah, I'd prefer a matte just because these are all like ultra shimmery. So with one of the looks, I did add in a matte shadow, the one that I have on today. So these are the shadows dry. You can also use these wet and dry. Let me just show you these wet as well. All right, so we've got the shadows dry, we've got the shadows wet. You can see there's not gonna be a huge difference using them wet versus dry, except for really this shade. This last shade here is a duochrome shade, and it's not as obvious when you use it dry as when you use it wet. So that's when you can really see a little bit more of the color shift. You can see it in the pan as you kind of like angle this in certain ways. You see it's got like green, blue, and then when you get it just right, you see purple as well. So it's really, I think it's a really beautiful color. It doesn't have a ton of shift, not like a Pat McGrath shadow would, but I do think it's really, really beautiful. Now I'm gonna share with you the 3 looks that I created using this palette. And again, in my first impressions video, I have a look that utilizes this one and Early Bird together. So that's there if you want to see these 2 palettes combined. And then when we come back, I'll go over, any remaining thoughts on this palette, as well as my favorite items from this Dior collection, now that I've really been using everything a lot. So we are starting off with the Refer 27, and I'm going into this peach shade in the center here. And we're going to put this just right here in the crease, very, very lightly, just a touch of this. You can see that it's giving me some of that satin sheen, and it's just slightly brightening. You can see the difference. Next, we're gonna go into this olive green shade, same brush, and just gonna kind of dab this on here in the outer portion. And this is, in my opinion, like a larger crease brush, so you can see it's getting quite a bit of the real estate on my lid there. And I wiped off the brush. We're gonna go into the gold shade here, and we're just gonna put this over the rest of the lid here. And if I go in with my finger with this, it makes it much more opaque, but I want to work with it in sheer layers instead, so I can kind of layer over the edges of this green a bit. All right, taking the same brush, going into the peachy shade here, and I'm just gonna dab a tiny bit of that in the inner corner. You can see it's gonna overlap the gold a little bit, and that's okay. These are both light enough that I think it's just adding a little something extra there. I think it makes my eyes look a bit more open. So I'm just taking the brush with nothing on it, and I'm just feathering out a little bit of that peach shade into the gold there. So I have a little bit more of a transition. And I'm going to take my finger into the gold, and I'm just going to add just a touch of it right to the center. So it's a little bit more opaque right there, and I have a little more shine. Taking the brush, again, nothing on it, just kind of tapping over everything on the lid. Just lightly make sure there are no drastic changes, if that makes sense. And now let's look at lining the eyes. For the lower lash line, I'm gonna go in with the Sonia G. This is the pencil one. I'm gonna go into the olivey green shade, and I'm just going to do this lightly here. Okay, wipe the brush off a little bit. Just gonna go into the peach and just extend the inner corner down a little bit and layer it a little bit over the edges of the green. Next, I'm taking the Evian spray water, and I'm gonna dampen this brush, and we're gonna use that for the upper lash line. So for the upper lash line, we're gonna go into the deepest shade here, and I'm just gonna twirl the dampened brush into it. So at this here, I'm just gonna do a line. I mean, you could go with a thinner brush and get a smaller line, but I twirled the brush, so as I'm swiping, I'm actually very slowly spinning this brush, so I have like fresh product every time. Except for here, when I go back to the inner portion here, I'm just kind of using whatever's left on there. All right, so that's it. I'm taking this Refer 27 again, and I'm just kind of brushing over, there's no shadow. I'm just brushing over the tops of the eyeliner just to make it a little bit more blurred at the top. I'm not going all the way down to the lash line because I do want that more pigmented color and everything right down there. I just want the edges to blur just a touch. So there's that. And I'll finish that up with mascara in a minute, but first let's move on to blush. So I decided I want to go with 462 Coral Flight, but I just want a very light application of this. So I'm gonna take the Kyoto, this is the Premium Series fan brush, and I'm just gonna get some here on the brush and just lightly dust it on. You can see I'm barely touching this. I think that gives a nice application. I think this fan brush might be my favorite way to apply these blushes. I haven't really been loving these new Dior blushes from this collection, but I think I like it this way. It also doesn't look quite as shimmery this way. There we go, just like a very light dusting of it. I like that, actually. I'm gonna add just a touch more. And for lips, I'm actually gonna go in with a Dior, this is one of the Stellar Shine lipsticks in number 452, Ibis Pink. So I'm gonna blot that. And I'm gonna go in with this is the new lip crayon, what are they? The Graphist in Vibrant Nude is number 004. And I'm just gonna go around the edges with this. And I'm just gonna add a touch more of the Ibis Pink. This is the final look from a distance. All right, so we are starting off with the Sonia G Classic Crease. I'm gonna go into the olive green and just gonna get a little bit of this and put that very lightly in the crease. I think we'll get a little bit more. Right, and we're gonna go into this shade here with the Sonia G Soft Shader. And we're gonna put this, just gonna kind of tap this on about halfway. Let's get a little bit more there. And then I'm gonna go into the deeper shade and we're gonna put that on the outer portion, but I'm tapping over the last bit of the other shade, number 4. Okay, wiped off the brush and just gently patting over that. Then I'm gonna take my finger into the olive green, just gonna get a little bit of this, stick that right in the center there. All right, so that's the eye mostly. Let's figure out what to do for the inner corner. I'm gonna take the Sonia G pencil one. I'm gonna go into the gold and I'm twirling this in here. I'm gonna add this to the inner corner. Just bringing that up a little bit. And I'm gonna put a little bit of that about halfway down on the lower lash line. And then for the rest of the lower lash, I'm going into the olivey green shade. Just gonna put that right here. I'm just gonna take the crease brush that I used earlier, no shadow, just kind of cleaning up the edges here. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go in with the peach actually and add a touch of this to the center also. Just, it looks a little bit too flat. Just gonna take the soft shader and just kind of pat that out, just make that a little bit softer. And for the eyeliner, I'm going to take the new Chanel Stilo in Vert Emeraude, which is number 46. Just going to very lightly go over the liner with the pencil brush. All right, so I'm going to add some mascara. I'll see you in a second. And this is the final look from a distance. So I finished it off with the Ilia Limitless Lash Mascara. On my cheeks, I have the Armani Neo Nude Color Balms. I have shade number 20 Cool Brown and 50 Cool Mauve. And then foundation is the Givenchy Prisma Libra in shade 1 N95. And underneath that, just on the cheeks, I have the Auric Glow Lust in Morganite. And Gucci Brow Pencil. On the lips, I have the Dior Lip Liner in 100 Nude Look just on the outline. And then I filled everything in with the new Ultra Care liquid lipstick in number 483 Glide. And that's it. Thank you so much. All right, so we're gonna start off with 443 Cashmere Matte. This is from Dior, it's one of their singles. This is the Sonia G Blender Pro. And I just want some sort of like brown neutral matte. And I'm gonna just stick this in the crease. And I saw a look that Cherie Voyage had done on her YouTube channel using the Nightbird palette where she used all of the shadows wet and it looked really, really pretty. I don't want to do the same look, but I do want to incorporate the one shade wet and see, you know, what I can do. I'd like to make it a little bit softer of an effect. So we're going to play with the wet and dry. And I just wanted to have some sort of like neutral base right at the crease area before I do that. All right, next I'm taking the Westman Atelier eyeshadow 1 brush and I have sprayed it with the Evian spray water. And we're gonna go into the deepest shade here. And I chose this brush because I thought it'd be easy to kind of paint it on. You can see how it's got this triangle shape, but any brush will do. I'm gonna put this on the mobile lid. Look at that color. That's just so pretty. I really love the color of this shade. And while I'm using this color, I'm gonna go ahead and take the angle portion of it and just get a little bit of this for the lower lash line. Oh, wow. Got a little bit more than I planned on it. I will probably buff that out a bit or something. Take some of that off. All right, so my eyes are pretty much dry. Now, when you are using the shadows wet, with my recommendation would be to get the brush wet. You know, you want to dampen it. You want it to feel wet, but not soaking wet. So I always wipe it on the back of my hand to take off any excess water before dipping it into the color. It's just like paint. You want that like consistency where it's wet and movable, but if it's too watery, it's gonna be very diluted. It's gonna like, you know, be a little drippier, harder to work with. But if it's too dry, you could end up having it be like a little chunky, if that makes sense, where some parts are a little bit more wet and others are less hydrated. So in my opinion, you know, just make sure your bristles are, you know, saturated, yet the excess water is removed. And that's why I like using more of this paintbrush style when I'm using something wet, because it's a little bit easier to control that. If you're using a fluffier brush, you know, unless you truly saturate the bristles, the center ones will still be a little dry. And depending on how they go on your eyes, you know, it's just not as smooth, if that makes sense. So now that everything's dry, I'm gonna take the Blender Pro, and I have wiped this on my cloth. I'm gonna go into the peach shade here, and I wanna put this all over the lid here. I wanna see if this will soften it up while still keeping this like duochrome effect. I did soften it. I think I still prefer it wet. Like, I love that jewel tone look. This is interesting as well. All right, so didn't quite do what I was hoping it would. I'm gonna go into the dry portion of my deepest shade here, just with this Blender Pro, and I'm just going to add a touch more of this to the outer corner here, just right on top. I'm taking the smudger one from Sonia G. I have no shadow on it. I'm just gonna kind of remove some of the excess shadow here. All right, and I rehydrated this. I'm gonna go back into the same shade, just on the angle here. I'm gonna put this on the upper line here. See how pretty it looks as a liner. And I'm going to get the smudger one damp as well. I'm gonna go into the inner corner with this with the gold shade wet. All right, so this is it. I'm gonna show you this from a distance. This is the look from a distance. I have to say it didn't really turn out the way I wanted it to. Not really sure how much I like it, but yeah, here it is. All right, so I'm just taking the Koyodo Premium Fan Brush and adding the Nude Clay blush. So this is number 468. You can see that, you know, mine is sparkly. Some people's, I mean, none of them are matte. However, it seems to be inconsistent. Some people have some that are more sparkly than others. Mine is pretty sparkly. So I do prefer going in with very light layers with the fan brush. I feel like the sparkle isn't quite as evident and I can build up the color gradually. So that's what I'm doing with this shade today. And for the lips today, I'm gonna take the, this is the Vibrant Nude in the Graphis lips, and I'm gonna put on a very light layer. I still have like a residue of lip balm left from this morning, and I'm gonna leave that on and just get a very light coating of this and add a lip gloss on top. So I'm gonna go ahead and blot this just a little bit. And I'm gonna take, this is the Dior Addict Lip Maximizer. This is just a little sample. You can see I've never used it. It's I believe it's gonna be essentially clear. I just wanna get a little bit of gloss and mute it just a touch. All right, and that's it. So now it looks more like a nude lip gloss. This is minty. I'm sure at least most of you, if not everybody, has tried one of these in the past. It is a free gift on the website at the moment. And there we go. So this is the final look from a distance. And I have to say, I do like the eyes better now that I've done the rest of my face. It's still not what I had intended. I think, you know, but I do like it. So I hope that was helpful so you could kind of see a little bit more about how this palette performs. And when I went a little bit deeper into the Early Bird palette, I found that, you know, that mustard shade really just wasn't that great. It didn't perform very well. It was really just not a good shade. But I have to say, with the Nightbird palette, all of these shades perform well. I think is very beautiful. It is fairly similar to the Dior Jungle palette, if you already have that. Although, you know, this one is pure shimmer. And I do have a comparison of that in the first impressions video linked down below, as well as some other requested comparisons. So I think overall, this palette is, in my opinion, kind of the star of the collection. I think it is not only the one that photographs the best and, you know, looks the most unique in advertisements and all of that, but I think it's also the one that performs the best. And in my opinion, I really like this palette. So for me, this Dior collection was my most anticipated release for quite a long time. I've been waiting and waiting for this to come out. I picked up quite a bit of this collection because I was very excited. By the way, this is the Nightbird nail polish. And I have to say, this was really more hit or miss for me. You know, I thought that this palette would have, or not this palette, this collection would have been very well fine-tuned because this was originally slated for 2020 and they postponed it because of COVID. So I thought that with all of that extra time, you know, everything would be perfect. So I was disappointed with the Early Bird palette, disappointed with a few of the other products. I think the nail polishes are nice, but I did expect a little bit more of a color shift. And for that, you know, really, I usually use ILNP, or I Love Nail Polish. That's the brand I usually use for more duochromatic, multi-chrome type polishes. And I knew these weren't going to be quite that level. I just thought they'd be a little bit closer to it than they actually are. So I think the nail polishes are nice, but they're not fantastic. I would still purchase them again though. And then the blushes were a bit of a disappointment to me because they're very shimmery. Now, after talking to a lot of people and seeing swatches and so forth, it seems like there's inconsistency in the product, and some people get some that are more shimmery than others. Perhaps like a batch wasn't well mixed or something like that. So I do think mine are a little bit more shimmery than what other people are able to get. And I also think due to the shade of the sparkle and like the contrast with my skin, it can actually make it stand out a bit more. I have to say my Nude Glide appears more sparkly than my Coral Flight blush. So I like the blushes, okay-ish, but they weren't really what I wanted. I would have preferred something without the sparkle. So for me, those were kind of misses of the collection, but there were some things that I really do love from it. And I have to say the Nightbird eyeshadow palette is a favorite. I love greens and blues with eyeshadows, you know, and I really do love the Jungle palette, but the Jungle palette has a shade kind of like this, but it doesn't have more of these blue greens. And the denim palette is a little bit more blue than green with these. It is a little bit similar. Let me just show you real quickly. So first, here is Dior Jungle. So this is the like olivey shade that is fairly similar. Okay, so you can see that the Jungle one is going to be more yellow based. And then here's that like peachy shade that is also similar. And you can see that it's going to have a little bit more of a browner base. It's a little bit deeper. It's not as vibrant of a peach. You know, it's not kind of that brighter look with a whiter base. But let's take a look at denim here. And I mean, you've got this bright blue. I'll just put this at the bottom because it doesn't really compare here. Same thing with this more, the satin shade in the middle, which you can see on my skin, it goes fairly well. It's that beige shade there. But let's take a look at these other three shades. So we've got this one, this one, this one. So this is a navy. That's really not going to go. These two are going to be the closest, but you can see that they are more blue. Even this one here, which is kind of like a teal shade. Let me put that here again. Let me get a little bit more on there. And you can see that, you know, it's got aspects of it, but they're pretty different. So I do think that this palette is different enough, in my opinion, to own it with the other palettes I have in my collection. And I really do like this palette a lot. The other standouts for me from this collection were the Ultra Care liquid lipstick. I purchased the shade Glide 483, and I really like the applicator. I really like the color of this, and I think it's a really great formula. I thought it was going to be more of a mauve or mauve shade, but it's actually more of a tea rose, in my opinion. I think it's really beautiful. But my favorite lip product is going to be this Graphist lip crayon. So this is new. I mean, they have some others. They don't have a lot of these. I think there were three shades that came out with this collection. I only picked up the one, Vibrant Nude, and I have been wanting to wear this every single day. It's smooth, it's creamy, it goes on beautifully. I love this Vibrant Nude shade. So you can see that it is a medium base nude, but it has like mauve tones to it. So it's really beautiful. You can use this as a lip pencil. You can use it as a lip crayon, you know, lipstick style. I have it on now with some gloss, and I just think it is fantastic. So those will be my three favorite products from this collection, the Nightbird and the two lip products. And overall, I think the collection is nice, but it didn't quite meet my expectations. For part of that might be the buildup of the hype and so forth, but part of it is also the lack of consistency and quality. Speaking of early bird there. So those are my thoughts on this collection. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to let me know if you have any other questions or comments on the Dior Birds of a Feather collection in general. And I hope this was helpful. So if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please give me a thumbs up. That really helps a lot. And consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you very soon. So have a great day and stay safe and healthy.